Hello and welcome to another episode over here on the Matt O'Leary NY channel. What is going on? We are here to preview Jets Bills, and today I am joined by David Tilton of the Bills guys over on Cover One. Dave, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me again. Repeat guest. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. A little different from when we did it in week one. Was expecting Aaron Rodgers led New York Jets season, and we ended up getting an entertaining game, overtime game between these two teams in week one. But I think fair to say for both sides, season's gone a little different than maybe expected here.
Yeah, season's definitely gone different from expected for the Bills for different reasons from the Jets, right? I think when you think about how the seasons have gone, maybe for the Jets with losing Aaron Rodgers, I don't know how your viewers feel, but like maybe the Jets are overachieving a bit without Aaron Rodgers, and the Bills certainly look like they're underachieving with the roster that they have. So an interesting matchup now as we kind of head into the home stretch of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were just saying before we hopped on and started, going live here, this feels like a must win game for both sides. I mean, Jets sitting at 4-5, Bills 5-5. Kind of want to avoid that sixth loss this early in the season, especially with how tight the race is right now in the AFC.
The race is super tight. You have some unexpected teams in the mix, right? Like the Texans expected maybe they would be a bit more competitive this year, but they're right in the thick of the playoff hunt. The Steelers may be overachieving a bit as well, right there. The Browns may be overachieving a bit. Now we'll see what happens with them with no Deshaun Watson. The Chargers are still right there. The Bengals are still right there, even after losing last night. We'll see what happens with Joe Burrow. So very thick and muddied AFC playoff picture at the moment. So yeah, it's every game matters at this point.
Yeah, it does, and especially, in the division is always super important. The Bills made a big change this week coming off their loss. They changed offensive coordinators. I wanted to get your thoughts on one, I guess, just the change in general and how much of a difference you'll think it'll make this week.
Yeah, this week, it's going to be tough to see how much of a change they can really implement. I think playbook probably going to remain largely the same. So I think the changes that you might be able to see, in the immediate short term are things around like play sequencing, how Joe Brady's going to deploy certain plays from the playbook at certain situational moments in the game that you could see maybe changing a bit, and maybe some tempo as well. Maybe the pace changes up a little bit. Just something that kind of changes the feel a bit for the Bills offense. I do expect as things maybe go forward and the buys in a couple weeks, maybe a few more wrinkles and things like that added into some of the existing playbook. But, really right now, this is more of like a vibe change for the Bills than anything, I think. Right. And so really what you're expecting from Joe Brady this week is just more of a, I think more of one of those situations where you've seen in the past where like maybe when you put in the backup quarterback, it gives you a spark, right? And like this is like a change in the coordinator. Maybe it gives you a spark a little bit. Maybe the players feel a little bit more accountability to themselves because a lot of the players, big supporters of Ken Dorsey, and probably felt like, once he was out of the building, they felt somewhat responsible, right? Because a lot of the issues for the Bills have been on the execution side as well, not just sort of the coaching and play calling. So will be interesting to see how the Bills players react and how Joe Brady handles this first game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with Dorsey, the last 2 years, the Bills, even with, some struggles this year, there's been pretty much a top 10 offense the last 2 years. So do you think Dorsey kind of just more of the scapegoat, or were there some underlying issues with him as a coordinator?
Well, there's a couple things, I think, right? There's no one really else to get rid of, and Sean McDermott's not going to get rid of himself. I think that you don't get rid of a position coach in this scenario, right? That doesn't really do anything for you because the guy calling the plays doesn't change. You can't get rid of players at this point in the season, in the middle of the season, right? You're certainly not going to get rid of your your quarterback or your best like offensive weapon. So the only move to be made was Ken Dorsey. And like I don't believe it was really a result of what happened in the Denver Broncos game, because in reality, Ken Dorsey was probably the least of the problems of that game. That was more of execution and other things that kind of went awry, turnovers. But the Ken Dorsey change seemed like more of a culmination of things that have been building up since that London game where the Bills lost to the Jags, and just not maybe being creative and tailoring plays to his players' skill sets, not loving the sequencing of his play calling, using some things maybe a little too often, putting a little bit too much pressure on the execution, and not giving Josh and the offense enough layups and like easy underneath schematic type stuff. So I think this has been a culmination, and at this point, there's only one man left standing in the sort of organizational, I guess, leadership from a coaching side, and that's Sean McDermott, right? So now it's all on him. The pressure's on him for the rest of this year, and so big pressure on McDermott going forward for the rest of this year. And I mean, I don't know that there's really a ton of pressure on Joe Brady because it's an interim situation, but he's got a chance to make an impression. And again, I think largely this is going to come down to execution from the offensive players, and especially from QB1 limiting the turnovers.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I liked Joe Brady a lot when he was hired by Carolina. I know things ended up poorly there, but I think the quarterback situation wasn't great. But now kind of got a chance to rebound in Buffalo, and obviously we'll see how he does calling plays the remainder of this season. You mentioned the struggles over the last few weeks. I mean, 2-4 in their last 6 games. The Buffalo Bills are. What do you think the biggest reason for this midseason slide is?
Well, I think firstly, since that London game, the Bills have had a huge amount of significant injuries on the defensive side of the ball, right? They've lost Matt Milano, they've lost Daquan Jones, they've lost Trey White. So they lost really maybe their most important players at each level of the defense on the defensive side of the ball. So in in the past, where maybe if the offense had gone through a bit of a rut here and there, the defense was still going to be really top notch, right? And keep giving the offense chances and chances and chances. So kind of starts a little bit with that, and the defense honestly has done an admirable job over the last couple of weeks, except in really where they've really struggled is like the last drive or two of games, right? You go back several weeks, you see they almost let that game get away to the Giants, right? They let the Giants come right down the field. They give Baker Mayfield a chance at a Hail Mary at the end of the game. They let Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos march right down the field after they take the lead. So even though the defense has been pretty solid throughout the majority of games, at the ends of games, and I forgot about the Mac Jones as well, came back with less than 2 minutes against them. So last drives of these games, the defense has really let the team down. So that's one big issue. And that really comes back to McDermott. And then the second issue really has been obviously the offensive execution and the turnovers. I think the combination of execution, turnovers, and then the play calling, right? All three of those have been big factors. And it seems like there's a little bit of a lack of confidence right now with the offensive side of the ball for the Bills, which is not something they've really had to deal with a lot of the last couple of years with Josh Allen, and even going back to when Brian Daboll was the coordinator. They've always had that swagger really the last couple of years on offense that, okay, you know what? We didn't get the score this drive. We'll come back, do it in the next drive. 3rd and longs, no big deal. Josh Allen can rip it 10, 12, 15 yards, pick up that first down, no problem. Like, hasn't really been a problem. And the analytics show the Bills still are a good offense, but turnovers, really bad starting field position over the last couple of weeks. Time of possession has been awful for this Bills offense in recent weeks. They just got murdered by the Broncos in time of possession, and even in the games prior to that. So that could factor in why the defense maybe caves a little bit late in games. But yeah, it's been a combination of all those things. And then obviously getting to the point now where it's do or die for the Bills at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the start there with the injuries. I do think on the defensive side of the ball, that's made a big difference. And from an outsider's perspective, and I guess, specifically against, from the Jets, because this guy feels like he kills the Jets every time they play. But Matt Milano, I think, is really such a huge loss for that Bills team. Really feels like the kind of the heart and soul of the defense. And like I mentioned, like just even the last 2 times these teams played, it picked off Zach Wilson in week 1. Folded up Mike White like a pretzel in the second game last year. So obviously I don't want to see injuries, but kind of glad he's not playing in this one because, man, he's a Jets killer, and obviously is, I think anyway, a big time leader on that defense.
I mean, yeah, all pro last year, second team all pro. He's he's definitely the heart and soul of the defense. He's the emotional leader of that defense, right? And you think like the Bills defensively, right? Past couple seasons, who has their emotional leader really been on the defense? At times, it's maybe been Jordan Poyer. That's never really been Trey White's kind of mantra on defense, or kind of his. He's been a good player, but he's gone now too. Von Miller playing sparingly, he could be an emotional leader on the defensive side of the ball, but they really don't have that guy right now who's like an above average to elite level player who's also the emotional leader, right? The closest thing they probably have to that right now is Ed Oliver. And he's playing great, but yeah, there's just really no replacing Matt Milano, right? It's a committee replacing him. We're fortunate that Terrell Bernard at the other linebacker spot has come on and played well this year, but yeah, it's been a patchwork next to Terrell Bernard with Dorian Williams and Tyrell Dotson and others, and you just can't replace Milano.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we're talking here with David Tilton, of co-host of the Bills Guys over on Cover One. If you have any questions for us as we go, make sure to drop them in the chat. We'll take care of those as we go. Something that I wanted to talk about, you mentioned already is turnovers, and that played a big factor the first time these two teams played. The Jets were able to create, turnovers against, Josh Allen, the 3 interceptions, the fumble. Allen has interceptions in 6 straight games now. Is this starting to become, it feels like anyway, a concerning trend with him?
Yeah, this has been a big topic of conversation on Bills, like amongst Bills content creators this past week. And Eric, who heads up Cover One, does a really good job breaking down film, and Ant from our network, they went in and like they broke down the film of all of Josh Allen's interceptions so far this year, and by their count, maybe 3 or 4 have really been directly attributable to, I'll call it bad decision making, bad throw, 100% on Josh Allen. But there have been a lot of situations where some of these interceptions have been balls going through Bills players' hands and getting deflected to the defense. Situations like that happened last week, even against the Broncos. A ball goes right through Gabe Davis's hands and ends up in the laps of the Denver Broncos. And a couple of those have been really unfortunate bounces, right? A lot of these where you see a lot of times, like at the line of scrimmage, for example, a defender knocks a ball down when a quarterback kind of lines up the throw. Like you have a situation in the Buccaneers game, or I'm sorry, the Giants game a couple weeks ago, where the guy just falls, tipped straight in the air, and it falls straight in his lap, right? So it's a problem. Like, I'm not trying to say Josh Allen's not accountable for it. He's always had a lot of turnovers. It's well documented. He's led the league in turnovers, combined turnovers over the past 3-4 years. But that's going to happen with a guy that plays like he does. He's consistently near the top of the league in pass attempts, so that's naturally going to lead to more interceptions. He runs almost as much as any other quarterback, maybe not so much this year, so that will potentially lead to fumbles. He also tries to keep plays alive, probably more than any other quarterback, which has tended to lead to some fumbles or negative plays. But as always, you have to try to take the good with the bad with him, and the good has traditionally outweighed the bad, and it's just not been that recently, right? So in the past, maybe it's been overlooked a bit. Recently, not so much, because the Bills have had trouble scoring. So, I mean, QB1 needs to get things together. He has to play a clean game against the Jets. He can't be giving the Jets short fields, easy field position, things like that. But that's going to be on him to kind of make sure his decision making's on point this weekend, because it's going to be important.
Yeah, without a doubt. And sometimes that happens too. Like the turnover numbers look inflated because of some mistakes from whether it be a back or a receiver, or like a tip drill. And interceptions and turnovers aren't always on the quarterback. So I think there's some nuance to the conversation. And you're right. Like Allen's the kind of guy where he has that little bit of a gunslinger mentality, and that's what part of the reason what makes him so great. But also makes him susceptible to the turnover.
Absolutely.
Specifically, just looking at the Jets, the last 3 times the Jets and Bills have played, so since the start of last season, the Jets defense, I thought, has done a nice job against Allen and limiting Allen. There's in the Jets 2 wins, they've turned him over multiple times. But even in the loss last year, they didn't really let Allen beat him with his arm in that game. What do you think the biggest reason for his struggles against this Jets defense is?
Well, I think the Jets have really done a good job in getting up the middle pressure on Allen in the past, couple games, even going back to prior games than that. Quinnen Williams has been a big problem for the Bills, and up until probably this year, this is probably the best offensive line the Bills have had in a couple years, but traditionally have kind of struggled to pass protect up the middle, and you see Allen at times in the past, maybe not trust his line as much and kind of flush himself from the pocket, maybe prematurely. This year, the line's been doing a little bit better job of that, but I do think that the Jets being able to kind of get up the middle pressure without having to blitz Allen a ton has caused him some problems. In addition, right, I think the Jets just in the back end and coverage are one of the best, if not the best team in the league, and that makes things tricky. Gabe Davis is very inconsistent. Stephon Diggs has had his some success against the Jets, but it hasn't necessarily led to like game changing or tide changing type plays. So that's been a problem. And I also don't think the Jets have a really good pass D. I don't think the Bills have committed to the run enough against the Jets the past couple games. I think they've really kind of gone away from that, which look, the Jets are a tough defense no matter how you look at it. But if there is somewhere where you could potentially attack the Jets, it's really through the running game. And the times where Josh Allen has kind of made some of these big plays against the Jets has been with his own legs. So yeah, I think some of that probably needs to become the focus, and we'll see how Joe Brady maybe does this week with that, because he's really not a run first type of guy either. But yeah, I'd say that the Bills not necessarily committing as much to the run as they probably should, and that pressure that the Jets have been really being able to get up the middle against Allen the last few games has been a problem for him.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the Bills, from a Jets perspective on this defense. It's very, very hard for me to have any sort of criticism on this defense right now, just because of they're doing their job. They're keeping the team in this game, in these games, and the reason why the Jets are losing is because their offense is just abysmal right now. So it's hard for me to harp on this defense. But with that being said, if there is an area of criticism, they have at times struggled against the run. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the recipe for success, especially, I think Cook's been, finding his own. And that game last year up in Buffalo, Allen was really good using his legs. And that's another area where, earlier in the season, the Jets really struggled with running quarterbacks. Russell Wilson had a really nice game against them with his legs. They didn't do as much through the air, but when looking at this Jets defense, I'm relatively confident in their passing attack, defending a passing attack. I know Diggs, had a monster game and he's incredible, so it's hard to contain him. But when looking at this game in particular, I think worry more so about the run game, but more specifically Allen when he uses his legs and tucks it and runs.
Yeah, and I mean, look, some of the Jets' struggles against the run can be really attributed back to volume as well, right? The Jets have really been behind in a lot of games this year. They themselves haven't scored a lot, so Jets have the fourth most rushing attempts against them as a team this year, which obviously will wear a team down over the course of a game when you're facing that much in volume of rushing. Um, you tend to see it right early in the game, and you kind of go look at that Raiders game. The Jets were really doing a nice job containing Jacobs early in that game. And then as the game wears on and he's just piling up attempts, like you see him start to break a few. And that's kind of like, I think, where the Jets probably have statistically, been hurt is because of the volume of rushing attempts that they face. So if Allen can kind of help in that regard, if the Bills can work James Cook a little bit more in the running game, if they can get Allen a little bit more involved in the running game, there's a chance, although I don't think it's likely, that the Bills call up Leonard Fournette from the practice squad for this game. He could be a nice addition to the rotation. But between Cook and Murray, Latavius Murray and Allen, like there should be opportunities for the Bills to to get something going on the ground, right? I mean, it's gonna be a slugfest, right? I think like it's going to be a boxing match. I don't think the Bills offense is playing well enough to where this game's going to get out of hand either way. So they're going to have to stay committed to it. And I think Allen should be a part of that if the Bills really want to maybe move away or kind of spark, something with this now change, in offensive coordinator.
No, without a doubt. And I guess that's a good transition into kind of what I wanted to get into next is what you think some key matchups are, that you're looking at on both the offensive and defensive side of the football.
Well, from one, like if I'm the Jets, I'm sure you guys as fans and watching that Raiders game last week, you're probably like, why are we not getting Breece Hall involved in the passing game sooner, right? I mean, the second they throw a screen to Breece Hall was like third, fourth quarter, he rips off like a 35-yard gain. Then he had like 2 more catches after that, and like prior to that, he's just like running. A Raiders team who've been really bad at defending the run have been bottling him up on the ground. And for Breece, obviously been struggling a bit on a yards per carry basis on the last few games. But like for the Jets, if I'm going up against this Bills team, the Bills have really struggled to defend running backs from a pass catching standpoint historically. And like they've been better at it this year, but like the Bills are susceptible to giving up some big plays to running backs in the passing game. And we saw that even last week with guys like P. Ryan making some big chunk plays in the passing game for the Broncos. So if I'm the Jets, I'm going to try to get Breece involved in the passing game probably a little bit earlier on than I did last week against the Raiders. And if I'm the Jets, I'm also hoping that Garrett Wilson's going to play. It seems like he will by the looks of it. Zach Wilson has 240 plus passing yards in 3 straight. Garrett Wilson has at least 7 catches in 4 straight, 12 plus targets in 4 straight for Garrett Wilson. He's the guy that obviously needs to kind of make those key first downs for the Jets. And, the Jets are the worst team in the league in third down conversion rate. So I think if you're the Jets, you got to keep yourself into manageable down and distance. I really feel like the Jets have, similar to the Bills, have had some really untimely penalties on offense where they have some nice plays get taken back. And I go back to Breece Hall. I feel like Breece has been the unluckiest guy when it comes to like having gains wiped out from penalty the last 2 or 3 games, even go back to the Chargers game. I just feel for him, right? I'm a big Breece Hall fan, and I feel like the Jets just constantly kill themselves and with bad penalties. And as a team that really struggles to convert on third down, you got to avoid that. So if you're the Jets, get Breece involved earlier in the passing game. Keep yourself in the manageable third down distance and avoid those penalties if you're the Jets on offense. So I think for the Jets offense, that's probably where I would go.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up Breece Hall and specifically through the passing attack because, the last touchdown the Jets scored, you have to go all the way back to the Giants game. It's been 36 drives, which just sounds absolutely insane without a touchdown. But it was a check down that he takes 50 yards to the house because you just get the ball in his hands, and that's what he has the ability to do. Now, after the game against the Raiders, Robert Saleh was asked about getting Breece more involved in the passing attack. He mentioned that as a point of emphasis. And then again, during the week in one of his press conferences, it was brought up again. Obviously, Nathaniel Hackett in charge of the offense. I think some Jet fans were a little jealous that the Bills.
And they cut Michael Carter too, right, this week. So,
yeah.
I mean, he's kind of been their passing threat as well. I know they've been using Breece more in that, but like it's Breece right now. Like it has to be.
Yeah, it feels like they're going to lean on him, and I would expect that number to be significantly high, the reception specifically. And, I mean, you look at the week 1 matchup, Breece popped off a couple big runs against this Bills defense, and I think this would be the time to lean on him specifically. Now, normally, how's the run defense kind of settled down after that first game, or is that still an area you think where the Bills defense could get beat?
It's definitely an area where they can get beat. Javonte Williams had a pretty nice game against the Bills. I know the Broncos were struggling to score touchdowns in that game once they got into the red zone or the Bills side of the field, but I mean, Javonte Williams was having himself a pretty solid game on the ground. Even a team like Tampa Bay, who's one of the worst rushing teams in the league, Rachaad White had his moments. Saquon had his moments against us as well. And you see a guy like Ramondre Stevenson rip off a big gain at the end of the game against the Bills as Mac Jones led them down for that game-winning drive. So, like, if I'm the Bills and I'm looking at like where I would be most concerned, it would be defending the run. Now, the Bills did go out at the trade deadline and bring in Linval Joseph. I mean, wasn't a trade, but they signed him to kind of help shore up that interior from a run defense standpoint. And Ed Oliver's getting closer to 100%. He's been playing a little banged up, but he's getting closer. I think that would be the area, right? I mean, the Bills had also traded for Rasul Douglas to go kind of pair up with Dane Jackson. We'll see if Christian Benford is back this week. So I think the Bills, from a secondary standpoint, Micah Hyde's limited as well so far this week, so maybe he's going to be back. I think if I'm the Jets, like, I'm looking at that Bills defense and seeing that they're still pretty susceptible on the ground, and also again getting back to the Jets and like keeping them in positive down and distance. Like, even if you run it with Brees twice in 3-4 yards and you get into a 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2, like that is pretty significant for the Jets. And you got to feel pretty good that if you're the Jets, you can pick up 2 or 3 yards with a guy like Brees. The problem I think the Jets have had is there's just been so much shuffling on the offensive line for them this year, right? And they just can't seem to get in the groove. So if the Jets can get any kind of consistency push up front from their O-line this week, where again, Brees under 3 yards a carry the last 3 games combined, if they can get that figured out a bit, I think they'll have a pretty good chance to exploit that matchup with the Bills defense.
Yeah, it's a great call out on the offensive line because it's been nearly every game they've had to shuffle it, whether it's due to injuries or ineffectiveness. But it should be the same unit that they ran out there on Sunday night against the Raiders this week, with rookie Joe Tippmann at center, who's done a really nice job. Laken Tomlinson and Mekhi Becton on the left side have kind of settled in nicely there. No Dwayne Brown. He's not ready to be activated yet. So on the right side, you're looking at Xavier Newman and Max Mitchell. Max Mitchell on the right side of right tackle has done a good job of holding up, but a little bit concerned with the edge rush going into this game potentially being an issue and getting pressure against Zach Wilson, because in that first matchup, it felt like the Bills did a really nice job of getting Zach Wilson under pressure in the game.
Yeah, and look, that's been an issue for the Bills finishing at the quarterback since we've had some of these injuries on defense, right? I mean, we've tried some different things to try to get pressures on the quarterback. I mean, Von Miller's still really not back to where he needs to be as far as being super effective as a pass rusher. Greg Rousseau has had his moments, but he's kind of more of that like big-bodied sort of edge setter, knocking balls down, getting the sack when called upon. It's really AJ Epinesa, right, that has been kind of the best pass rusher right now for the Bills, and Leonard Floyd. So I think if Epinesa and Floyd kind of can swap in, rotate in on passing downs, with Rousseau and Miller rotating in, right? I think if the Bills can kind of send some different rotations in, maybe there's a chance. But that's been a struggle for the Bills recently. So I think it's like I'll call it a weakness against weakness if you talk about like Jets against Bills in this regard. And so who's going to maybe be average, I'll say? Is the Jets O-line going to be maybe like average enough, or is the Bills pass rush going to be average enough to maybe make a few plays? But yeah, that's been a struggle for the Bills getting home, especially in this last 4 to 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, in particular, the Jets offensive line actually I thought held up okay against the Raiders. So
yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, so hopefully, that continues in this one to have them any sort of chance. Now, again, for the Jets to have any sort of chance, they have to get in the end zone, which is something they haven't done in 2 straight games. We hit on briefly, Garrett Wilson being questionable. He needs to play in this game. If they don't have Garrett Wilson, I just don't know how the Jets do anything through the air, because Allen Lazard has really struggled the last few weeks with drops and penalties. And beyond that, you're looking at undrafted rookie and Xavier Gibson, who's a nice special teamer, but I don't know how much ready he is for a bigger role. But I guess, beyond Garrett, I don't have much faith in this passing offense without him being available.
Yeah, I mean, Gibson obviously had that nice play last week against the Raiders. It's kind of seems like he's maybe like their gadgety type guy. I don't know kind of what the Jets envision with him or how Hackett might continue to use him. But I like Gibson. I think he's a nice player. But then you kind of look at like beyond Garrett Wilson, it's going to be, Brees Hall in the passing game and probably Tyler Conklin, right, in the passing game. And Conklin has had some nice moments as well the past several weeks. I thought, like, when the Jets signed him, I liked that signing. I thought the Bills were a team that could maybe go after Conklin in free agency. Like, I thought he did a nice job filling in for Irv Smith with the Vikings when Irv Smith was out. And, Conklin's a nice receiving option, and Wilson found him a few times last week against the Raiders, right? And so I think that, you still have CJ Uzama there as well. Like, he's not really been maybe the receiving option that the Jets have been hoping for. But I think, like, if you're the Jets offense, you pretty much got to funnel through Brees, through Garrett Wilson, and through Tyler Conklin. Those are your three best options at the moment. And I do fully expect Garrett Wilson to play. It certainly seemed like when Robert Saleh was speaking that it sounded like most of their questionable guys were probably going to play this week.
Yeah, that's the hope, but right. I think more than likely he will, but again, that's one that is a necessity to get in. I guess just transitioning now to kind of final thoughts here, but to me, this feels like a projecting to be a low scoring game. I might even be surprised if either one of these teams reaches 20 points. I think it could be that
first
low.
to 20 wins probably.
Right. And that Robert Saleh unfortunately said that before the Raiders game, which I didn't love. Like, I don't love that mindset of like, that's how we're going to try to play on offense. But, you look at it, the Jets at 13-6 and 12 points in their last 3 games. I think the Jets defense is, I would assume should, at least on paper, be in the conversation to hold Buffalo to around 20 points or maybe a little less, hopefully, if they want to win this game. But we might be looking at like a 17-13 kind of score here, one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, like, Tyler Bass has been a little bit inconsistent lately. He did make his field goal in the last game, but he had missed a couple in the games prior to that. Greg Zuerlein had a nice night against the Raiders. Leg still looks very live. And he's been nice for the Jets this year. And so if this game comes down to field goals in Buffalo, you just never know what could happen there. And it could come down to that. And honestly, if you talk about special teams and going beyond just the kicking game, Sam Martin has been dreadful for the Bills punting recently, and a lot of line drive punts, a lot of opportunities for guys to return. And obviously we go back to week 1, playing overtime, line drive punt to and the Jets return it for a touchdown to win the game. So special teams probably more of a factor in this game than maybe people care to talk about or want to talk about. But the Bills have been pretty bad on special teams recently as well, as far as coverage on punts. They've been taking the ball out of the end zone on kickoffs and getting like starting drives inside their own 20. And for a team that's struggling on offense and struggling with field position, it just makes no sense to me. So special teams wise, I think the Jets maybe have an advantage in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The Jets special teams has been, top 5 unit for most of this year. Defense, I think you could argue the same, that they're a top 5 defense in the league. Really, to me, it just comes down to the offense. You have to score a touchdown. You're not beating the Bills kicking 4 field goals. Obviously you're not beating them only putting up 6 points like they did the week before. Got to find a way to get in the end zone here. You have a prediction. King Jamie the Mad, our favorite resident Chiefs fan, says 20-17 Jets, defense with 2 pick sixes. That might be the only way that they're getting in the end zone here. But it all counts the same at that point. But yeah, I think, I don't know. Do you have a score prediction for this game?
Yeah, I'll go I'll go Bills 16, Jets 12. I think 1 touchdown scored in this game. Bills score 1 touchdown, 3 field goals. The Jets score 4 field goals. And I'll go 16-12 for an ugly, odd scoring game. Got to pick the Bills. I have to, just because I have to, right? And if the Bills need to win this game no matter what. So I'll go 16-12 Bills.
There you go. I love it. So, but if you remember way back when we talked before the season, I picked the Jets to win in week 1. And I said that I think the Jets and Bills are going to split this year. And I still believe that, unfortunately. So I had the Bills 16-13. So we're on the same page pretty much, but obviously hoping the Jets win this one to keep their season alive, still holding out a sliver of hope that maybe Aaron Rodgers is just an alien and comes back mid-December, and who knows. But yeah, I'm thinking ugly, low scoring, defensive struggle that sets the NFL back 40 years, which has been the Jets special this year.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets are the type of team that could, as King Jamie the Mad says, they could end up winning a game because of 2 pick sixes and maybe the defense does all the scoring. Like the Jets are the team that seem to me like they could do something like that.
Love it. So, all right, where can people find your stuff if they want to follow along?
Yeah, so I'm on the Cover One Network. You can find me on Twitter at Tilt Money. I have a co-host, Judge Mathis. You can find us on Twitter at the Bills Guys. Always tweeting out interesting stuff there. We do the pregame show for the Bills before every game. So we're actually going to do an early pregame this week, 9 a.m. on the Cover One YouTube, so people have a chance to maybe watch the replay views before the game. And then we do Monday night air raid hour every Monday night at 9 p.m. on the Cover One YouTube channel. So that's where you can find me. And if the Jets win, I would maybe invite some of your viewers to come in and watch some of that therapy session we might have, me and my co-host, on Monday night.
There we go. David, appreciate you joining me. As always, it's always a blast catching up and talking some Jets Bills for this one. For David, I am Matt O'Leary. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe before you go. Check out David's work, and we'll catch you next time.